The James Webb Space Telescope, a marvel of modern engineering designed to surpass the capabilities of its predecessor, the Hubble Space Telescope, has recently made a discovery that's both awe-inspiring and spine-chilling. From a mind-boggling distance of 7 trillion miles away, it has detected a faint glow. Could this enigmatic luminescence be the twinkling lights of a distant cityscape on some far-off extraterrestrial world? Let's embark on this cosmic journey from the very beginning. Not too long ago, NASA's infrared Spitzer Space Telescope unveiled a captivating sight: a family of 7 rocky exoplanets orbiting a single star known as TRAPPIST-1. Fast forward to the present, and our newest stargazing powerhouse, the James Webb Telescope, has set its sights on one of these distant worlds, TRAPPIST-1b. Yet, what it found wasn't a promising new home for humanity, but rather a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland. Astronomers turned to James Webb's mid-infrared camera, MIRI, akin to wielding heat-sensing Terminator vision, to peer into the thermal emissions of TRAPPIST-1b. What they discovered painted a bleak picture: scorching temperatures averaging a blistering 450 degrees, reminiscent of the searing heat inside an oven, and an apparent lack of atmosphere. However, amidst the disappointment lies a beacon of scientific achievement. For the first time ever, researchers have captured faint light emitted by a small, relatively cool exoplanet, akin to those within our own solar system. It's a groundbreaking feat made possible by James Webb's unprecedented sensitivity to detect dim, mid-infrared light. The initial discovery...
Well, that's the problem. The James Webb Space Telescope is upsetting the apple cart. All of a sudden we realize that we may have to rewrite all the textbooks about the beginning of the universe.
That perfect Goldilocks region where liquid water can exist. It seemed like a cosmic jackpot for finding potentially life-supporting worlds. But before we start packing our interstellar suitcases, a reality check is in order. These distant realms, though tantalizingly Earth-like, remain frustratingly beyond our reach. TRAPPIST-1 and its planetary entourage are located a mind-boggling 235 trillion miles away, with their star being smaller and redder than our own sun, belonging to the class of M-dwarf stars. Despite the challenges, astronomers remain captivated by such celestial phenomena. But don't get too excited yet. These planets aren't likely to become new worlds for humans to explore, mostly because the TRAPPIST-1 planets are totally out of our reach at the moment. They're just too far away, at a whopping 235 trillion miles away. Their star is also much smaller and redder than our sun. It's classified as an M-dwarf star. In our home Milky Way galaxy, there are twice as many of such stars as there are stars like the sun, and they're also twice as likely to have rocky planets orbiting. It's probably not surprising that astronomers are very interested in such stars. They're the main targets for seeking potentially habitable planets, and it's also way easier and more convenient to observe rocky planets around such smaller stars. But there's a catch. M-dwarfs are more active than our sun. They frequently flare and spew high-energy rays, which are likely to be extremely damaging to planets' atmospheres and any forms of extraterrestrial life. When researchers examined TRAPPIST-1b before, their observations weren't sensitive enough to determine whether this world had an atmosphere or if it was just a barren rock. But now we know the planet is tidally locked to its star, which means that one of its sides always faces the star while the other is stuck in perpetual darkness. The latest simulations suggest that if this planet had an atmosphere, its temperature would be much lower since the air would redistribute the heat around both sides of the planet. Unfortunately, the James Webb Telescope recorded much hotter temperatures than needed for such a favorable scenario. It indicates the absence of an atmosphere and knocks the planet off our list of possibly habitable worlds. But the main excitement here isn't actually the features of TRAPPIST-1b. The main takeaway is that James Webb is capable of making such kinds of measurements. It'll help us explore the atmospheres and temperatures of many other distant worlds. Wow, the NASA hotline is ringing off the hook. The call center operator is all sweaty from stress. They barely have time to answer the phone, and all the messages they get say the same thing. There's something glowing on the moon. Indeed, hundreds and thousands of amateur astronomers were watching the moon that night, and suddenly there was a bright light on it as if someone had lit a powerful spotlight on the surface. Scientists immediately began to look for an explanation for this phenomenon. They first thought it was simply the glow of an airplane flying between the observers and the moon, but then it wouldn't have been seen by so many people from different parts of the world at the same time. The next suspects were the Starlink satellites. Theoretically, one of them could have played a cruel trick on amateur astronomers. They could have mistaken the small satellite's light for a flash of light on the moon. But then again, if the satellite were the culprit of this mess, the flare wouldn't be static, but moving. While some scientists continued to search for an answer to this mystery, others decided to investigate the phenomenon in more detail. For this purpose, they built a new telescope north of Seville, Spain. The conditions there are quite suitable for observing the moon. The telescope has 2 cameras controlled remotely from the campus in Germany. If both cameras pick up any unusual phenomenon on the surface of the moon, it will quickly zoom the telescope there to see what's going on. It'll also require advanced artificial intelligence to teach the cameras to distinguish between the unexplained phenomenon on the moon and the light of an airplane, a satellite, or a small meteorite that just entered the Earth's atmosphere. While the telescope is doing its investigation, we already have a theory that may explain the appearance of such bright round flashes on the moon's surface. So, the moon influences the tides of the seas and oceans.
2 of these publications have been accepted for publication in a scientific journal, establishing a track record of quality
and 1-2 times stronger. While the moon orbits the Earth, at one point, it may be as close to our planet as possible. Then, the force of the interaction will be greatest at this point. Tidal forces may force cracks in the surface of the moon to open and release gas from its interior. A powerful jet of gas will lift the lunar dust with it, and what we see as a bright flash through our telescopes is really just a fog of dust, which is round and reflects sunlight. Well, if you look at it from a distance, it really does look like a flash. As the dust rises, we think there's been a small explosion, and that flash gradually fades as the dust settles down. These things happen all the time on the moon's surface. They're called transient lunar phenomena. And besides lunar flashes, much more mystical and bizarre things have happened. Back in 1178, 5 monks claimed to have seen the moon, being in the shape of a horn, begin to split in 2 from an upper point. Then, fire and sparks began to blaze from the place of separation. It was as if a dragon were spewing flames. In the next moment, the moon began to pulsate, and then returned to its calm state. This phenomenon was repeated more than 10 times, and the flames took different shapes each time. When this nightmare was over, the moon turned black. It wasn't until the 20th century that scientists tried to explain the phenomenon. They theorized that a large asteroid collided with the moon at the time, and it was this asteroid that should be blamed for creating the Giordano Bruno crater, 15 Brooklyn bridges wide. Because the moon has no atmosphere, asteroids that approach it don't burn up. Having a lot of weight and speed, they cause an explosion on impact, and here on Earth, we see it as a starburst. For example, on May 13, 1972, there was a meteorite impact of 1,000 tons of TNT near where Apollo 14 landed. If we lived much earlier, we might have witnessed constant bright flashes on the moon's surface. All the craters there are formed by such meteor strikes. So, imagine the fireworks that were there years ago. And a lot of those meteorites were even useful too. They brought water with them. Yes, there is water on the moon. NASA confirmed this fact after studies with the SOFIA telescope, which was mounted on an airplane. The observations were made from the upper atmosphere of the Earth. At such an altitude, the dry air allowed the telescope to see even the smallest details. Water might have been in the craters at the poles of the moon.
Now we say we don't understand how galaxies are born. Let's make a telescope to help us. So, we make the James Webb Space Telescope.
Of course, it's only H2O molecules that are present in the dust layers, but that's something. If we manage to collect all this water, we'll get very little of it in comparison. The Sahara Desert has about 100 times more water than we found on the moon. But an even more unusual phenomenon is happening there right now. The moon is actually rusting, just like a piece of old metal. For rust to appear, we need iron, water, and oxygen. Lunar soil has enough iron in it, and as we've already learned, there's some water too. The last piece of the puzzle is oxygen. Everyone knows there's no atmosphere on the moon, and we can't breathe there. But oxygen is still present. The solar wind brought it there. The wind from our warm star moves at an extremely high speed. It scrapes oxygen from the upper parts of our atmosphere and carries it further through space. Eventually, the wind with the oxygen molecules reaches the moon. Voila! All the ingredients for corrosion are in place, and the iron ore on the surface of the moon begins to take on a reddish hue. If this process goes on long enough, in the distant future, the moon will look like Mars. It will turn orange-red. Yes, the signature color of Mars came exactly from that corrosion that began there thousands and thousands of years ago, when there were rivers and seas with water and an atmosphere with oxygen. At the same time, space might not be as black as astronomers initially thought, and as your eyes tell you. At least, that's what a 2021 study suggests. With the help of NASA's New Horizons mission to Pluto and the Kuiper Belt, scientists have managed to see space without any light interference from Earth or the Sun. The research team looked through the images taken by the probe and subtracted all light from the Milky Way, known stars, and possible galaxies. They also removed the light that might have leaked in from camera quirks. And guess what? The background light of the universe was still twice as bright as predicted. The reasons for this extra brightness are still unknown. Astronomers will keep studying this topic, but until they find the answer, one thing we should probably agree on: space seems to be more charcoal than pitch black. Subscribe for part 2 of the video.